Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's News Philanthropy Network program. We're just going to wait another minute or so to let people sign in and get settled, and then we'll get started. So glad to see everyone. It's freezing cold and snowy where we are in Philadelphia. Don't know if anybody else has the same or if we can all be jealous because you're in a warmer climate, but hope everyone's doing well. Yes, Lauren, it's cold and my house is cold. Rebecca, is that everyone in the waiting room? Freezing in Prague. I bet you're freezing in Prague. And thank you for being with us, whatever the time difference is. Annika,
there's still a few more folks coming in.
Okay. Oh, it's freezing in Jordan, warm in Florida. It's so nice to see where everybody is.
Well, I'm with Annie. It's cold in Philly.
And in Cape Town. Summer there, I think, right? Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to today's News Philanthropy Network seminar, year-end fundraising review workshop. We thought this would be a really important workshop to host because now that many of us have finished up our year-end fundraising, it's really important to be able to look back at the last year and even the years before that and see what our trends in fundraising are and how we can use those trends and data to help inform our programs and plans for the next year and for the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Forman, who is our Director of Advancement at the Lenfest Institute, who has been knee deep with her team on figuring out what last year's results actually mean and what are we going to do about it moving forward. I think we'll spend some time going through a presentation, and then if we have time, we may jump into some breakout rooms so we can roll up our sleeves a little bit. And if this program is interesting and you think we should spend more time and do a really deep dive on real specifics about how you can look at your data, results, and trends to inform your programs moving forward, do let us know because we can certainly schedule that. So really glad you're here from all around the world. And Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you and your presentation.
Thanks so much, Annie. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Forman, Director of Advancement for the Lenfest Institute. It's so wonderful to see all of you here today. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, but wanted to just note that we want this to be a dialogue and really participatory. Because I'm going to have a screen share up, I may not see all of the questions in the chat. So please also use the hand raise function on Zoom, or Kira and Haley, my lovely colleagues, if you guys can also chime up any questions that maybe folks ask in the chat. And as Annie mentioned, we will attempt to go, hopefully if we have time, move into some breakout rooms at the end to share everyone's sort of great success and work and questions and challenges with one another. So bear with me one moment. As we get started, I'm going to pull up the screen share in a moment. We're going to ask a few polls that we're going to launch throughout this, and would love just to see where everyone's at in year-end fundraising. All right. Great. All right, so the first question was, we're going to talk today about end of year fundraising. And when we talk about end of year fundraising, I'm specifically referencing sort of looking back on your entire year, not just how things went during November and December, when I imagine many of you are also running news match campaigns, but really looking at the whole year, understanding the data, understanding what's working, what's not working, how your fundraising is trending, and then thinking through how you can use all of that great learning to inform your planning and your future success. So when we think about year-end fundraising at the Institute, we sort of think about it in three sections. First, there is the review. What is all the data you should be looking at and reviewing and pulling and putting in spreadsheets, or for us on Salesforce dashboards, what's all the stuff that you can be looking at, all those numeric values, and then starting to take that information and really analyzing it and figuring out sort of what am I seeing in this? What is it telling me? How did I do compared to last year? So what's under maybe those top line numbers I've been talking about internally, or we've been talking about with our board? And then using all that wonderful analysis to plan for the future. And something I would note is that this is not about making make work, right? It's not about analysis for the sake of it. It's really about analysis to help drive your organization forward, to be more planful, more intentional, and more successful in the future. So this just sort of made me laugh. I'm sure for all of us, especially those of you who are working in fundraising databases, there's just so much data you might be tracking, everything from literally what day a gift came in, what time that gift maybe came in, what link someone clicked on to get to your giving page in the first place. Was it a check? Was it a donor advised fund? Where do they live? And there's so much that can be at your fingertips. And I just thought this was funny because I'm sure we've all had experience in our careers where someone has said to us, just, I want it all. I want to understand all of it. And, that can be really, really overwhelming. So one of the things that we think about the Institute is what is our standard set of data? And I'm going to launch another poll when I can figure out how to do this. This first one was just interesting. It looks like about 70% of us do have a process to review our fundraising for the previous year, and 30% don't. So I definitely think that moving to the breakout rooms in a little while will be great. One second. Haley, can you just help me launch? Sorry, poll 2. Thanks. Okay, so what I'd love to hear from everyone on this is, do you have a set of data that and when I say set of data, do you have something that year in and year out, you're thinking about, what did I analyze last year? And am I analyzing that again this year? And the reason that that's important is because, we can get easily paralyzed by all the data we have at our fingertips. And so, in this case, perhaps had this gentleman on the phone said to the gentleman holding folders, yelling at him, here is the data I have for you. This is what we're working with. This is what we can move forward. Perhaps their interaction would be a little more friendly. So when you're looking at your raw data, we at the Institute look at it primarily from 2 vantage points. We look at individually processed gifts. So every single one of for us in Salesforce, they're called opportunities, the opportunities that are processed over the year. We can see by month when there were more gifts than others. We can see the dollar amount, of course, on every gift, where that donor is coming from. But then we also look at annual giving by donor. And I'll show you in a moment sort of how we look at the reports in 2 specific ways. But you don't necessarily need a sophisticated database to be able to understand your fundraising, but you do need a way that you're tracking it, and a way that you're sort of methodical about managing your numbers over the course of the year. Because I'm sure, as you know, if everything is sort of sitting in a Word document, making sense of it could be really challenging. But when you think about the fact that a database allows you to move numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, you can slice and dice and sort and look at data in a whole host of different ways. I'm also a really big proponent of the more the better into my initial fundraising, my initial spreadsheet. So I might run a report in Salesforce and put like every data point I could ever imagine looking at from an opportunity or from a donor in that spreadsheet, because it is so much easier to delete columns as you're going than it is to say, oh, I really should be looking at it this way also, and to rerun your data again and again to get there. So we think, and the other thing that I would note is we also think about the overall value. When we think about we think about gifts as opportunities, but then also the overall value of a donor. And if you're an organization that has a subscription or a membership program in addition to philanthropy, thinking about how you're really looking at that lifetime value and what data you can pull on donors as part of this analysis process is really important. And so really what you're doing is you're like filling your bowl with fruit. And maybe this fruit is going to become a banana bread or a fruit salad or a pina colada. And you're going to make a lot of great stuff with your fruit bowl at the end of the day. But right now it's about like filling the bowl, filling the cart with all the fruit you can, so you're best prepared to analyze your data and plan forward. I think it's interesting. So, in the first poll, 71% of people had a process for analyzing fundraising, but it seems like just a few less, so 67% have a standard set of data that they look at year in and year out. So we'll talk a little bit about why building on standard data and tweaking around the edges can be so important. This is just a quick overview of the way that we look at some stuff in Salesforce. So we're tracking everything really methodically, and we're showing a dashboard to our board on a regular basis. And this is a way that we track that allows me to always see this dashboard in Salesforce at any given time. And the reason that's important is because we have said to our board, to our constituency, we are going to look at this data in these ways. And then we're constantly reporting on that. And so oftentimes folks are asking for more information or definition within those categories, but we've sort of created a framework for them to work from, as opposed to the world being their oyster, like that sort of comic slide we looked at a few slides ago, where they're asking for everything because we're not creating a lot of structure around it. And then when we pull reports, I mean, we really look at the close date, the amount, what type of gift it was, who the donor was. You know, I'm pulling as much of that stuff into Salesforce as I possibly can. The other thing I mentioned is that we also look at donors by sort of year. So this is just a quick screenshot of of donors that we could look at, and we can see here who gave this year but not last year. For those of you who have been in fundraising for a long time, there's a lie bunt and side bunt. You gave last year but not this year. You gave this year but not last year. Really understanding how people are trending, and not just looking at the overarching numbers, but looking really more specifically at the data under it and how your individual donors are moving from year to year. Looking at it that way also allows you to take a step back and say, like, how am I losing people? What's my attrition rate? And we'll look at that a little bit more in the analysis phase. But I think it's important that we look at donors. We look at donors as organization or individuals, as look at their trajectory over time, and then also look at individual gifts and how you're trending on that. I'm going to pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions.
I think there's a question in the chat about the designation column, and to explain what that is.
Oh yeah, of course. Kara, so we are a little unique at the Institute, where we are fundraising for the Institute. We are also fundraising for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we are fundraising for Spotlight PA. And we use a designation coding system in Salesforce to track where it's basically a drop-down menu to track sort of what the designation of a gift should be. And the reason we do that is because when you hit a certain, let's say you're raising money for a specific editorial project, and you want to be able to see all the donors that are supporting that project, we use like a drop-down pick list in Salesforce that allows us to run reports on it. Because if you're just manually typing it in, you can't report on it. So it may work for a gift or two, but when you have a critical mass of donors supporting one project, it allows us to look at those things in segments a little bit more easily. I see a question about our fundraising collection software is connected to Salesforce. Yes, it is. So at the Institute, we are News Revenue Hub clients. And so we use Stripe and Salesforce and MailChimp, and they are all connected on the back end. So when a donor makes a gift for us in Stripe, it loads a ton of the data we already know we need right into the system. And Stripe is a credit card processing sort of front end tool that can be used by businesses, but also can be used as your giving page as a nonprofit. All right. So after we've pulled all of our data, we have to figure out how we make sense of it. And, so we talked about, where does somebody live? What date did they give on? What are their interests? I mean, you could look at your data in a million different ways, and you could slice and dice it in a million different ways. But I think it's really critical to think about what it is that you're trying to get out of it at the end. Do you want to see maybe what program areas are growing with support? Or do you want to see maybe what geographies you're receiving more gifts from? So if you are a statewide news organization, it's probably really important to you to know what pockets of your state are the most supportive. We often want to know what's driving donations. So are they seeing, and are they coming to our website directly and clicking on the donate header at the top? Are they seeing something about, are they clicking on a newsletter donate button? Sort of what's attracting folks? And really look, you can look at that obviously at any given time, but taking that year-long look allows you to think about how maybe you plan your new year a little differently to capitalize on what's working, and then tweak in the places where you're perhaps putting a lot of your effort and it's not going so well. So one of the questions that I'd love to ask us in the chat, we couldn't figure out, the poll system does not allow for an open-ended poll, but what are you trying in your own organizations? What are you trying to understand about your fundraising results? Where do you feel like perhaps you're not where you're succeeding, but also what are the things you're trying to glean from your data that perhaps you're struggling with a little bit, and we can talk about those. But a few things that we look at when we're analyzing our data is our number of donors, how many folks are giving recurring gifts versus single gifts. We look at institutional support versus individual support. We're always looking at the average gift as well as the average gift, the average support of a donor. And that's important because if you're an organization that leans really heavy on recurring donations, you may have a really low average gift because folks are giving $10, $15 a month, but you actually may have a really nice annual average annual contribution by donor. So thinking about your average gift in both of those ways, looking at your retention and your acquisition, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Perhaps like we just spoke about, the geographic representation of supporters, what appeals are generating success, and then perhaps if you're an organization that uses matching campaigns, really thinking through, looking to see if you can see a direct correlation between when you launched a matching campaign and the fundraising results you received during that time frame. So when we're looking at trends over time, we want to understand, obviously, are we growing? How is our pie different? So this is not from us at the Institute. This is just an example of perhaps the different ways you could think about your fundraising and think about that pie so you can see how it's shifting over time. It allows you to understand where you're putting your effort. And you could think about this in terms of both number of donors in each of those categories or total dollar amount. And that's important just to generally understand how diversified your fundraising is and how it's how it benchmarks against other like organizations. So really seeing sort of how are you doing? Are you seeing big spikes at certain times? Are you seeing lulls? And I think it's really nice, especially in situations like this, to be sharing with peer organizations, because I think we can all learn from each other's success. So another thing that's important for us to understand when we're looking at our fundraising data and analyzing it is retention versus acquisition. It is so easy to see a top fundraising number and celebrate your success. And for sure, as your fundraising goes up year after year, you should celebrate your success. But understanding where your donor growth is coming from is really critical, because I think it helps you recognize whether you have any significant challenges or risks or liabilities you need to be aware of. So if you are a $1 million organization and your donor growth, your fundraising growth went up 10% this year, understanding, are you retaining the donors you already had while attracting new donors? Do you have lots of holes in this bucket, but you're doing a nice job filling it? Or do you maybe have one or two donors that really pushed you over the edge, and perhaps those gifts aren't super sustainable? So when we think about our goal setting, we often, then this is before the end of the year, of course, we're often thinking about sort of top down and bottom up. So where do we want to be aspirationally? But then do we have all the donors in the right places to get there? And literally sometimes it's sort of combing through a spreadsheet line by line. This major donor is not going to renew. This one we think we can do a little bit more. So you can do that at a major gift level a little more easily. And through the analysis process, you can understand sort of who's coming in at the top and who's falling out at the bottom. And I think something to remember is that acquiring new donors is harder and more expensive than retaining the ones you already have. So ideally, you want to be plugging your holes while filling the bucket simultaneously. We just really want our buckets to have to get bigger. And the other thing about this, just understanding the attrition and churn of your donor pool, is that it can also help you think about how you focus in the new year. If you see that you are doing a really great job with acquisition, but you need to plug some holes, maybe you put some more resource against engaging your existing and recently lapsed donors. If you're filling those holes really well, but you're not seeing new donors come in at the top, then you know that that's a place you can focus your effort in the new year as well. And, I talked a little bit about this sort of in the bucket slide, but really understanding where you're vulnerable is critical. I think oftentimes when you're growing as an organization, it's so easy to celebrate that top line number and really be so excited about, we have more donors, we have more resource, we can do so much more. But if a lot of your new philanthropy is coming from a small segment of donors and you're not super diversified in your fundraising, it's just an important thing to know and acknowledge that if you lost one of your top 3 donors, it could put the organization in significant jeopardy. And so you want to focus obviously more on the stewardship of those relationships, but also diversifying that donor pool over time. Jill asked a question about starting this progress with your most major donors. Jill, are you referencing sort of the line by line work we often do? And you can hop on the screen if you'd like. So yes, we go through sort of line by line at our major donor level. And then at a lower level, we're understanding sort of how our community giving is churning, but we're not going through them line by line in the same sort of way, but we're looking sort of at total numbers and how many people are in that pot, where are we losing them? So for example, in 2020, we saw an enormous spike in community level giving in support of the Inquirer right as COVID hit. And we saw a huge drop off last year in 2021 from those numbers. So folks that made gifts one time and then weren't renewing. And so we were really thinking in 2022 about how we get some of those folks back, how we re-engage them, and what strategies we could deploy this year that we didn't deploy last year to connect with those folks in the new year. So you've pulled your data, you've analyzed your data, and now you want to plan for the future. And when you're thinking about sort of the best next step here, one of the things you can do is, as you're figuring out sort of how you did in the last year, but at a sort of a more specific level, not just at a top line level. And so is there anything in your 2022 plan that you need to adjust? Perhaps newsletters were a really successful way for you to engage and re-engage donors. So maybe you need more of those in 2022 and need to be more direct in your asks. We run print ads in the Inquirer, physical Philadelphia Inquirer, and we found in 2020 that they were really successful, and we did more of those in 2021. As we're going through this analysis, we'll look at how they did in 2021 and figure out perhaps how we can adjust. And the other thing about doing all of this work and looking at your data and analyzing it and then planning for the future, experimenting a bit throughout the year, thinking about we're going to do this special campaign appeal, or we're going to put these print ads in the paper, whatever it might be. Sort of thinking about the fact that you'll be analyzing this fundraising success on the back end. And so it's a great time to be able to test different methods or test different ways of engaging your audience. Kate asked, what are orgs seeing as retention rates these days, both for major and small dollar donors? I would love if folks want to type in the chat sort of how they're doing, that would be really great. And then we have a question about how we measure the success of print ads. That's a great question. So Kira on our team has been running those print ads, and we've been doing them a few different ways. We have a vanity URL. So if the giving page we link to has a back-end campaign code, so we know when somebody makes a gift as a result of that print ad, at least online. And then we do see a significant uptick in checks when we run ads. And we don't have a great way of tracking that, obviously, because folks could come in a whole host of different ways via mail. But we do sort of anecdotally know that those two things are connected. But the vanity URL, and there's also a QR code that we put on the print ads. And so we're able to track both of those. The other thing that, as you review and then you analyze and you plan for the future, not only can you maybe adjust your own plans in the new year to make sure you're spending your time most wisely, but you can also make the case, it can help you make the case for why philanthropy is so important at your organization, especially for those of you whose organizations may be fueled by a handful of different revenue streams, whether it's subscriber revenue and ad revenue, as well as philanthropy. Maybe it's some other combination. There's events and sponsorships in there. The more you can share about your data, your success, the community of donors that you're growing as a result, the better you are at making a case for why your work is so important. And not just in terms of, and also making a case for perhaps why you need someone else on your team, or why you need an investment of new technology to be able to work more efficiently. So perhaps when you started, there were 50 gifts a year and you were managing them on a spreadsheet, and now there's 500 gifts a year, and just the spreadsheet is not, it's just not, doesn't work anymore. You need a system, a database to be able to manage that work. Being able to say, this is how we've grown, we've hit this tipping point, we need more, whether it's more human capital or more technology, but we can't continue to grow at this pace without these other tools. The other thing I think that is important as you're thinking about planning for the future is that you can also say, not only do I need X, but are the things I'm using today actually going to help me continue to grow? So if you're growing 10% a year or 20% a year, are your systems going to grow with you? And it's just really, really hard to measure and to make a case if you're not tracking it. So having those tools are, just helps you get there better. And then the last sort of thing in planning for the future is you've analyzed your data. Perhaps you now are understanding that there's a key segment you want to focus on, or there are a group of donors who are giving $500 a year that you think have potential. What other data can you start to put in to your database or into your system to be better informed? So at the Institute, we are like big fans of wealth screening. It really helps you find the needles in the haystack, but perhaps you don't want to wealth screen every single newsletter subscriber you have, but you do want to wealth screen any donor who gave $100 or more. And it allows you then to be even more planful with where you spend your time, and you can do more in terms of mass campaign appeals, but wealth screening really helps you figure out who's the person I should write a handwritten note to, who's the person I should pick up the phone and call. We saw a handful of donors this year join our Lenfest Council, which is our mid-level donor community. And a lot of them were folks that we had wealth screened, that we had started engaging differently. So we do virtual events, and some donors had been $100 donors that went to $2,500. Some had already been $1,000 donors that went to $2,500. And perhaps without wealth screening, that $1,000 donor would have gotten a little more attention from us, but that $100 donor, we would have not had the resources to pay attention to. And so wealth screening can really also help you focus in your resources, and take a look back at, so right now we just submitted a screening for every one of our new donors from 2021 so that we can wealth screen them and be more planful in the new year. There's some comments. Look at Kara, a 2.6% churn rate of your members. That's really, really, really wonderful. Only losing seeing that kind of retention is pretty amazing. So kudos and congratulations. Is anyone else? I'm going to stop the share for a second. We're going to stop the share in a minute, and we're going to move to breakout rooms. But if anybody, we can sort of ask some questions as a group, but really these breakout rooms are intended to be an opportunity for us to connect with other organizations and people who are sort of in our same boat, share what we're doing in terms of our year-end giving, what's working, what's not working, perhaps where we're struggling. And that could be a systems issue. It could be a personnel issue. Maybe you have a boss or a board member who wants to boil the ocean in some bizarre way, or won't stop talking to you about a text to give campaign because it worked when there was an earthquake over here and all this money that was raised. And so how are you using your data to maybe inform your plans and help them understand, where you need to focus, or wherever you're at. So we have a room help. I have no idea where to begin. So think about the 30% of you who aren't doing any of this quite yet. We'd love to see you there. For those of you who feel like you have some of this foundation down, but could do more, we'd love to see you as you're climbing up your mountain. And then you are an analysis rock star, but it's always wonderful, I'm sure, for no matter what we're doing a really great job at, having the opportunity to hear what others are doing, and having some peer learning and information sharing is always so, so valuable. All right, Haley, are you able to launch those breakout rooms so folks can select?
They should be open.
All right. All right, so if everyone wants to join, so again, room 1 is help. I have no idea where to begin. Room 2 is I have some foundation. I could do so much more. And room 3 is I'm an analysis rock star, but I'd love to hear what other folks are doing. So we'll let everyone take a moment. Haley, how do I hop over? Sorry.
You can just hit join to whatever room. If you click on breakout rooms, or I can assign you.
I see.
That's
Nope,
easy.
I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't see that button.
From Santa Cruz local, a local news organization.